let's get into the opening salvo, if you will, ladies and gentlemen, and that is Concord. Now, we all kind of knew, Jamie, that Concord had the potential to bomb, and it did. It did terribly. So I have a story here from InsiderGaming.com. It was written by Mike Straw just the other day, as a matter of fact, yesterday. And it says the Concord Open Beta bombed on Steam. And the article simply says Concord is in the midst of holding its open beta on Steam, and the numbers, to be quite honest, have not been good. According to Steam DB, the beta for Concord has had a peaked player count of just 2,388 players, which happened on Thursday, July 18th. Since then, the numbers have continued to drop from an already disappointing level. July 19th saw a max of just 1,654 players. July 20th dropped down to 1,447. And on July 21st, it was at 1,117. So 1,117 people were playing the game on the 21st. Again, the article says this was a completely free and open beta over the weekend for a game that PlayStation has been targeting as its big hero shooter. If the numbers were that low when anyone could play, it's hard to imagine what they'll be when the game fully launches at $40. I mean, look, some of the things that, and shout out to Nico Muller, who posted this right before the show went live. I don't know whether he did it on purpose or he didn't, but it works out because it's a conversation we're having. According to Forbes, it says this: there is no spinning how poorly Sony's Concord Open Beta went on Steam. And an article that was posted the other day by IGN saying Concord already shaping up to be a heavyweight in the hero shooter genre. We could easily see it competing with genre giants. Yeah, I mean that you can see someone being honest and someone on the take. The being honest is Forbes because they are obviously reciting what many people in the gaming community who actually played it said about the game. And then there's the one that is getting paid to play, and that is IGN, which, of course, we know more than 40% of their ad read come the way of Sony PlayStation. So I'm not surprised by this. Jamie, look, this is another misstep for PlayStation. They bet big on this. Now, I'm not using it as a conversational piece because I think it's hogwash. There was a running rumor on Reddit and a few other of the places online where you can find rumors where Herman Holtz said that this is the greatest shooter he's ever played. I didn't find anyone credible enough in the journalistic community to actually print that. So that's not going to be a part of the conversation. If he did say that during an interview, we would have known about it. So I think people were just kind of piling on. Jamie, this is a disaster for PlayStation, who doesn't have any major first-party games releasing this year other than this game and, of course, Astrobot, which we all know that I'm excited for. This was supposed to be another entry into the gas game world. Now, Helldivers did great, and I use the word "did" in past tense because a lot of people have fallen off, and that's because the content has not been updated. Will people come back? I believe that they will. The game's fun, but right now it's just not making any more waves. This was supposed to, I assume, take up where Helldivers 2 left off and continue the hype train for gas games under PlayStation. It did not happen. Let's talk about it.
Yeah, it's a weird one because, was anyone really saying, you know what we need? Another hero shooter, and one that costs $40 that will also have microtransactions. People are fed up. People really don't want that. I mean, look at the Overwatch community. They love that game. They complain about that game. They weren't asking for a clone. They really weren't. And like you were saying before the show went live, Sony tends to beat their chest and talk about the numbers of like people playing, the reviews of the games, betas or whatever, and everything that's came out about Concord is negative. Like I haven't played the game, so I can't really speak to how the game plays. But I will say from what I've seen, as someone that doesn't like live service games really, especially like hero shooters, it looks like an Overwatch clone. No one was asking for that. And just to put this into comparison, do you know Valve has a game coming out this year which they haven't announced called Deadlock? It has more concurrent players than Concord did.
Wow.
This game hasn't been announced yet, and there's more people playing that than Concord in the beta. And bear in mind, the beta was free. To people that I think it was pre-ordered or had a PSN, and then they opened it up to everyone. And then, even though it was free, people were choosing not to play it. All they had to do was download it. And like, let's say the shoe was on the other foot. Let's say Concord was debuted on the Xbox show in June, and they had this beta and it failed. Would IGN really be putting out that article about how this is going to be an amazing multiplayer experience, how it's going to be a game changer, how it's going to stack up alongside Call of Duty, Modern Warfare, Overwatch 2, all that? No, they wouldn't. The check cleared. That's what it sounded like.
Yeah.
And like the multiplayer space is extremely saturated. When it comes to PvP at the minute, you basically have Call of Duty, Halo, X Defiant, and Overwatch. That's pretty much it. Nobody's asking for another one. And I think that like competition is always great. It really is. It's great. But humans, creatures of habit. Call of Duty players, as much as they were saying, hey, I want to move to X Defiant, I want something new, they came crawling back. Same with Overwatch. Every single game that's like, look at this. Destiny came out in 2014. They had this 10-year plan. People made fun of it, and Destiny's still here. And along the way, all these other games came up and tried to copy that formula. Remember Avengers? They tried to copy it. It failed. Suicide Squad killed the Justice League. We see what's going on with that. And Anthem. I was so hyped for Anthem, and it fell flat on its face to the point where the developers forgot that the game existed, and they left the in-game Christmas lights on till February, right? So, like, the multiplayer space has been a mess for years. People say they want new things, they want change, but everything that comes out is just a copy of something else. Sony has IPs that would like take off, because look at Twisted Metal, right? Twisted Metal would fill a gap in the multiplayer space that that isn't really filled up by anyone at the minute.
Yep.
You could have customer. I can't speak.
Customization.
Customization on cars and all that
yes.
stuff. And they also have another IP which I used to play as a kid and I loved. And these games don't exist anymore. SOCOM, third-person tactical military shooters. We don't really have any, but they went with a hero shooter in 2024 when people are just fed up with it. It's just too much. And look at this year alone for hero shooters. There's 3 or 4 coming out, one of which is a Marvel game, which is going to be multi-platform and free. Where does Concord stack up? And I think, you have this game where there's like 16 characters, maybe 4 of them look interesting. They literally look like they've just been drawn up by kids. The designs are terrible. The maps look boring. But like from everyone I've spoke to that played the game, they just said it didn't have enough content there. So like, how is this game meant to appeal to a fan base that's predominantly single player? Like they've been fed single player games for the past decade, being told, hey, this is a single player box. You're going to get single player games. And now they're given this multiplayer game. This multiplayer game, which they aren't used to. Because remember, during the PS3 generation, they had single player games, they had multiplayer games, they had fighters, they had platformers, everything. And then last generation, they pretty much told their entire fan base, if you're here for single player. And if you want multiplayer, you've got Call of Duty, Battlefield, and all that stuff. Concord, I don't like saying games are going to be failures because these are people's jobs at risk, right? I don't want anyone to lose any jobs. I don't want any game to fail. But every time I see Concord, I want to fall asleep. And I say that as someone that literally suffers from insomnia, right? So like, if that's doing that for me, like, have any of you two actually heard anyone say that this game's going to stick around?
Which one? Concord?
Yeah,
I mean, it's launching at $40, and there's even a $90 edition that gives you all the character skins. I'm assuming. Look, if you remember, Destruction All Stars, when it was announced for the PlayStation 5 as a launch title, at the last minute was added to PlayStation Plus, and there was no way to buy the game because they realized no one had pre-ordered the game. I would imagine, and again, I don't have the pre-order numbers in front of me. I know that from what I have heard, it does not look good. So, is it possible that this at the last minute drops into PlayStation Plus? I think that the only way this game even remotely has a chance for anyone to play this on PlayStation is for that to happen.
yeah. I mean, look, I think like trying to give this game off for free, hypothetically, to a single player centric fan base, it's just not going to work.
No.
I don't think there's anything that's going to work for this game because people, they don't like the look of the characters. The gameplay apparently is like a slower version of Overwatch, and like again, nobody was asking for this. I mean, this game came around when Jim Ryan was wanting to have all these different live service games, in the pipeline. Because if you think about it, yeah, Sony, they do put out single player games that sell millions of copies, but when those games come out, they kind of just stop selling over time. 3 months after release, the bell curve's going down, and not many people are talking about the game at all. But when it comes to multiplayer, you have multiplayer with microtransactions that make money every single day, every single week of the year. And Sony doesn't really have that. They don't really have that kind of game, and they clearly want that. Microsoft, they have that with Halo and Call of Duty and all that now. And like, I do think it's a good idea for Sony to have something like that because it generates revenue throughout the year. But again, nobody's asking for Concord. Nobody's wanting an Overwatch clone. And look at the big content creators, the huge ones that cover all these like big releases. It looks like nobody's really been paid to play Concord on stream. It doesn't look like any of the big content creators are talking about it, other than the fact that the low player count. So like, I don't know what's going to happen. I can't. The problem with this game is that they have this narrative storytelling throughout every week for like, I think it's like 2 months or something, where at the end of the week there's going to be a 5-minute cutscene or something, and it's going to tell a story. That's really cool. However, people are going to get attached to these characters in these cutscenes that they play as, and narrative wise, that doesn't even make sense itself because you're playing against other characters that are in your crew in the cutscenes. So, like, from a narrative standpoint, that doesn't make sense. They try to appeal to the single player fan base by putting cutscenes in multiplayer. That's not going to work. Do you know what else has cutscenes in multiplayer? Call of Duty. Nobody really likes that stuff.
Yeah.
That's why you can skip the stuff when the game starts. So, like, I don't think the game's going to pay off. I hope the developers, they have plans to make things work or have another game in development, because I see this as a colossal failure. Maybe IGN praising this game as much as they did doesn't make any sense, right?
It's a farce.
Yeah,
is what it is.
and
yeah.
I looked back. They gave Alien Isolation like a 5 out of 10. Sacrilegious, if you tell me, right? So, like, does it surprise me? No.
No.
But I don't see this working out for them, unfortunately.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that this is a failure at launch. Just look at the numbers, folks. Interestingly enough, and Umbra, I want to bring you in. I know you have to step away for a hot second. I want to get you in with your hot take on this. One of the things that we have all learned from Sony, besides them being very bullish and the masters of marketing, right? They know how to market their games. It's just what they do, and they do it extremely well. If Concord would have even been a blip on the map, Umbra, we would have heard about it. But we have not heard anything. So, to Jamie Moran's point about classic IP. I happened to find this post. Now, this person is a Sony fan. His name, he goes by the name is at the real Radec, Radec. And he says this is a very interesting point and lines up 1-to-1 to exactly what we're talking about. He says, just thinking about how we could have gotten The Last of Us Online, Twisted Metal, the London Studios multiplayer game, and the Spider-Man multiplayer game this generation if things turned out differently with a sad face. And think about that for a second. We have 4, and I say 4 because I don't care what anyone tells me, Umbra. The military shooter that didn't have a name was SOCOM. What part of SOCOM it was, how much of SOCOM it was from its predecessor, we will never know. It's canceled. It's one of the 4 canceled. But what I find to be unbelievably head-scratching is Twisted Metal had the potential to have people like myself who love the IP, who absolutely will play a new one, will play it multiplayer, will play and spend money on character skins for the vehicle I'm driving, as well as spend money in The Last of Us Online. I would have easily, if they had a season pass, probably bought it. I would have bought different skins for the guns. Spider-Man is another one. The Spider-Man multiplayer looks so dope. I don't even know what to say. And again, of course, the defunct now potential SOCOM game, which would have been what everyone is really asking for. Seeing how Concord has turned out has me believing a couple of things. This is still a directionless PlayStation, and their fan base is getting frustrated with them. No roadmap. If you are a PlayStation guy or gal and you're not asking where the games are as much as you did for Xbox, that's a problem in itself. Here, you look forward to what other multiplayer games do they have in the pipeline that are be of this ilk? Well, Jade Raymond's game, that is, of course, the Payday quote-unquote copy or ripoff, whatever you want to use.
I'm going to be honest. That has failure written all over it, too.
Yeah, it failure. Absolutely failure. That game has not been heard from.
It's not for the lack of the game being good. I don't think Concord is even bad from those who played it more. I've heard their opinions be kind of favorable. The problem is, the old thing of stick-to-itness. I don't think people want to stick to that. The PlayStation gamers, like Jamie said, it's not really their thing. And once you've catered to that audience and kind of, I guess, conditioned them into having these single-player adventure action games and such, it's kind of hard to get them to just like, oh yeah, let's go do these live service games now. And that's pretty much the whole roadmap is what it's looking like, these type of service games. Like when they showed the showcase and they had all those service games showcased, PlayStation fanboys, some tried to hide it. Some of our Hoover brothers tried to be, oh, it was great. But the honest ones, they spoke their mind and they said they didn't like what they saw. I'll give a shout out to, one in particular, actually two. Jack Move Johnny. I'm sure some of you all might know him.
Yep.
Jack Move has been hated on by other Hoover brothers because he has been super honest and harsh at times on what PlayStation has been doing and the moves they've made that he found displeasurable. Also, I would say BG Broken Games. He's also been that way. I'll give him that. But BG is kind of pessimistic by nature, so I'm whatever. But anyway, but the whole point of it is it goes back to, I think I've said this before, and I think it's kind of this downshift of live service games. You know how we've had other genres of games where kind of like, all right, yeah, the excitement for that is kind of I think live service games, they have their how do I put this? I think it's a tough spot to kind of land in when you have giants like Fortnite and multiplayer first person shooters like Call of Duty and you know what I mean, like all these games taking the attention away. That's the same thing with Halo. Like a lot of people are like, oh, Halo, they did this wrong. Well, it's not really just that. It's a lot of things that's adding
competition. More
so.
so.
It's a lot of competition that's harming the chance for them to have these numbers. Once people kind of find that game for them that hits that sweet spot, they're not really going to be shifting to go play something else. Call of Duty fans are going to stick to Call of Duty, and for Fortnite fans are going to stick to Fortnite, for instance, or maybe both might grab somebody, but they're not going to be playing a rotation typically of 3 and 4 of those types of games. I just don't see them doing it. How can you dedicate the time? Call of Duty itself is ridiculous, and all the tiers you have to get and the prestige and all that. Like, I don't have time for that, and it's the same thing for the First Descendant. The game looks cool. I enjoyed it from what I played of it. I didn't play a bunch, but it's one of those things I would have to stick with, and I just don't have time for it. I would have to really stick to that. It's not a strong story-based game. I'm not going to say it doesn't have a story. It's not a strong story-based games. So I think it's a bunch of things that worked against Concord. I don't think it's a bad game. I just don't think it's what the PlayStation gamers want. I'm also going to throw in this thing where we've had this real unnecessary negative discourse in gaming that has disrupted things with the whole, anti-DEI crowd and whatever, and the Sweet Baby Inc., etc. I think this game got hit by them saying, "Oh, the Sweet Baby Inc." or DEI too. I think that also played a part in it, because they saw the pronouns and people went to town, and they saw the overweight lady or whatever, and it's like, "Oh, there it is, DEI." So a lot of those things I think played against it too. And I will say this, respect to whomever on how you feel on the pronoun things. But I'm going to tell you, I feel like people have to be mindful of kind of pushing real world agendas into gaming. That Concord is set in space somewhere. It's like a Guardians of the Galaxy. Why in the world would they have pronouns of they, them, and all? Like, come on. Even I can see that, and I'm forgiving. I don't even care about that stuff, but I can see why people are like, "Oh, I don't like that." But the problem is people take it to extremes. So even if you don't like that thing, you don't have to jump to the extreme. People take it to super extremes, and that's the problem with discourse in this. But I think that also hurt it. And then I'll go one step further and add in, 2 steps. $40 price tag. It should have been free to play.
Yep.
At the onset. I think maybe they'll probably change that after seeing how poorly it's done. DEI is diversity, equity, and inclusion, Rick Hill. It's been a hot nonsense inside the gaming sphere, unfortunately, for the past year. But yeah, I think the $40 price tag is something that's hurting it too. You're putting this up against other hero shooters like Overwatch. Nobody's going to pay that when Overwatch is free. And you got it's silly. Also, you got Modern War. You have Black Ops 3 coming to Game Pass. Modern Warfare 3 is about to drop tomorrow in Game Pass. Yep. Who is about to pay $40 for Concord?